Hey, what's up everybody? This is OSubrick501 and today I'm going to go over one of the fastest ways to level up in Dragonflight. Now, Dragonflight's one of the most alt-friendly expansions we've ever had, but one of the big roadblocks to getting into the endgame activities you want to do is still leveling up. Now, leveling up in general, just questing or doing dungeons, is still pretty quick in this expansion, but the method we're going to go over today can potentially allow you to level up from 60 to 70 in only a handful of hours. Now, the basics of this farm is you're going to be taking the character you want to level up and you're going to be going and tagging mobs at the Cobalt Assembly level 70 elite area. Now, this spot is in the Azure Span, and if you've never farmed here, essentially what this is a max level elite grinding area where you kill enemies and loot reputation off of them, which levels up the reputation with a specific vendor at this area. And killing enemies also can drop these orbs that basically give you a different version of like Torghast powers. You can stack up and keep refreshing if you get the correct options. So at level 70, it's a pretty fun farm, gives you pretty good max level gear, but you can come here, tag enemies, and get massive amounts of XP because they're elite enemies. Now, there's actually a lot of nuance and different things you need to know for XP farming in this area. So first off, the way tagging works, especially when talking about elites, is a little bit different in Dragonflight. So you could join a group and have 40 people in a raid group, and everybody would still be able to tag every single enemy and get loot off every enemy. And if you're someone trying to level up, you could still get a certain amount of XP from all those enemies you tag, even while being in a 40-man raid. But there is some weird tagging where some enemies can be grayed out if too many different groups are here trying to tag the same enemy. So I think if a third group tries to tag the same enemy, they won't be able to. But like I mentioned, if you have 40 people in the same group, everybody can tag those enemies. And how much XP you get is actually going to depend on how many people tag it. So if you're in a raid of 40 and say there's just 2 of you that go kill a mob off at the side, you'll get a lot more XP than if all 40 of those people went and tagged that. And like I mentioned, even if you're in a group, you still have to tag enemies to get the XP in general. So say if you're on that character you're trying to level, you join that 40-man group. If you're not running around tagging the enemies at least once, you're probably not going to get XP, even though you can still actually loot the enemies. This is another reason why this is pretty weird, because if other people in your group are tagging and killing enemies, you can still loot them, but you wouldn't be getting XP most of the time for them. So whether you're in a group or not in a group, you still should be able to run around and tag most of the enemies and still get quite a lot of XP, even if there's a ton of other players also tagging and killing those enemies. As long as the health bar isn't grayed out, you'll be getting XP for this. Now, something else that I noticed is that even though you can get a lot of XP per enemy killed if only you and say one other person are tagging it, there seems to be a minimum to where you can't go below. So I was in a pretty big raid on one of my characters and I was still getting a little over 900 XP no matter how many people tagged it after a certain point. So after like 5 or 6 people of the raid would tag an enemy, I would get that 990 XP, but no matter how many more people tagged it, I would still get that same. So it seems like once you get to a certain point, the XP won't lower anymore, which is good because that amount of XP is still really good, especially for how quick you can kill enemies here, how many enemies are around. And if you're in a 40-man raid, even if these people aren't super geared, all these enemies are going to die super quickly. You're going to be killing tons of enemies. So you're just going to be getting a ridiculous amount of XP very quickly and very consistently. And also, just on a side note, the powers that drop from killing enemies here can't be picked up until you're level 68. So if you have characters at level 68 or 69 and you're trying to level them up, you can come here and pick up all those powers, and pretty quickly you'll become strong enough to solo these level 70 elites, even on a 68 or 69 character. So this is especially good for those last 2 levels, 68 to 70, because you'll be able to come here and farm it basically like you're a level 70 once you get a few of these powers stacked up. So there's a few ways it's going to be really good to farm XP like this. First off is doing it solo and just going there and tagging enemies and having other people kill them primarily. Now, if you're on a more dead server, you might go there and there'll be nobody there farming, so that could potentially not work for you. The second way is to look in the group finder and look for a Cobalt raid, because a lot of times there'll be raids farming here because, like I mentioned, everybody in that raid can loot those enemies, and once they're level 70, that's primarily what everybody is there for, to loot the enemies and get the rep off of looting those enemies. So even if you're a level 60, most of the time they'll just invite anybody that pops up on the list, because usually they're not going to be completely filled with 40 people, and you'll just run around, tag enemies and not die, and that'll be really good for XP, but that will give you a little bit less XP per kill. But like I mentioned, even at the lowest point, you'll still be getting quite a lot of XP. Now, another way you can also do this is just look for the 5-man groups that are farming for this, people that aren't going to go into a raid, but are just inviting up to 5 people and running around farming it. Now, as being a lower level, you probably won't get invited to these groups a lot, but specifically if you're on a healer character or a character that can heal and you can switch to heal spec, a lot of groups will still invite you just because you're going to primarily be healing anyway. And even at lower levels, you're still able to keep most people alive through this area. But if you're a DPS in a tank and lower level, you might not be able to get invited to those 5-man groups. But that's pretty much the entirety of this farm. You're just going here, either joining a raid or just tagging enemies that other people are pulling and killing in this area, and you're going to get a ridiculous amount of XP. But that's pretty much all I want to go over for this XP farm. I've been doing this to level up tons of alts, because that's pretty much all you have to do is level up alts and gear up. You don't have any of the other borrowed power systems. Leveling up is of pretty big importance for your alts. But that's all I want to go over, so subscribe if you want to see more World of Warcraft or other MMO videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about this XP farm, and thanks for watching.